Many of us, all of us, have had examples of mothers in our lives, and we've had godly examples. I know for myself, my mom was a great mom. She cared for 10 of us. She had the patience of a saint. She really did, and she was a great mom. But she was a woman who knew God, and she loved God too. But also, she left, as my mom, she left a lasting legacy on me and on my siblings as well. I can't speak for my siblings, but I can speak for myself. I know the legacy that my mom left on me in my life. Think about the moms in your life. Think about their faith. Think about the legacy that they have left behind in your life, or they're still having in your life. It's huge if we don't realize it and you look at it. Think about those things. This morning we're going to look at two mothers, actually three mothers in Scripture that were women of faith who trusted in the Lord, but also were women who knew enough to raise their children to leave a lasting legacy that would go for years and years and years and years, and generations upon generations beyond what that for that child or those children. So we're going to look at two different scriptures passages. We're going to look at the book of Exodus, chapter 2. We're going to look at verses 1 through 10, and then we're going to look at 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 5. But let's look at Exodus chapter 2, verses 1 through 10. Now a man from the house of Levi went and married a daughter of Levi. The woman conceived and bore a son, and when she saw that he was beautiful, she hid him for 3 months. But when she could hide him no longer, she got him a wicker basket and covered it over with tar and pitch. Then she put the child into it and set it among the reeds by the bank of the Nile. His sister stood at a distance to find out what would happen to him. The daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe at the Nile with her maidens walking alongside the Nile, and she saw the basket among the reeds and sent her maid, and she brought it to her. When she opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the boy was crying, and she had pity on him and said, "This is one of the Hebrew children." Then his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and call a nurse for you from the Hebrew women, that she may nurse this child for you?" Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Go ahead." So the girl went and called the child's mother. Then Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take this child away and nurse him for me, and I will give you your wages." So the woman took the child and nursed him. The child grew, and she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. And she named him Moses. And he said, "Because I drew him out of the water." And may God add the blessing to the reading of his word. Now, as we see this, there's some significant things here. Is that the woman who was to be born, a little bit of background was that the children of Israel had been in the land for over close to 400 years at this point. And the Pharaoh that was leading the land at that time was a Pharaoh that wasn't too kindly to the Hebrew people, because he felt that because they populated themselves and because they were growing so quickly and rapidly, he felt there was a threat. So what he decided to do was he had the male children killed under 2 years of age, because he felt that they were a threat to his throne and to his people, because they became so numerous throughout the land. If you read chapter 1 of Exodus, you'll find it out. So, long behold, there was a woman, and she had a son. She bore a son at this time. But what do we know about this woman? Now, it was a woman from the house of Levi went and married a daughter of Levi. So what do we know about the Levites? The Levites were of the priestly line. They're the ones who would follow, that God would establish as the priestly line. So that's important. The woman conceived and bore a son, and when she saw the son was beautiful, she hid him for 3 months. So here's this woman, a Hebrew woman. We don't have her name, but we do know something about her. She did what? She bore a son. And with the background, knowing that Pharaoh wanted to kill all the sons, what did she do? What did she do? She saw the child was beautiful. In other words, the child had a special. The child was special. The child was handsome. The child had special qualities about him. She hid him for 3 months. Now, think about that. Now, Pharaoh was looking for all these kids. Pharaoh was looking for all these children so that he could do what? So he could kill them. But think about this. If you were a mom, what would you do if you knew that your child could be killed? And you could be killed too. What would you do? Well, this is what this woman did. And I want to read from Hebrews chapter 11, verse 23. If you go to your Bibles, turn the book of Hebrews in the New Testament and look at Hebrews chapter 11, verse 23. Because this is really critically important. By faith, Moses, when he was born, was hidden for 3 months by his parents, because they saw he was a beautiful child, and they were not afraid of the king's edict. Now, in this verse, it talks about both the parents. It talked about the father and the mother. In the book of Exodus, it talks about the mother, but the father was still involved. But still, nonetheless, the mom had a part. The mom had a critical part in that. And so what is the key word there? It says in verse 23, by faith. So what do we know about this mom and these parents, actually, and the dad too? But what do we know about this mom, these parents? What did they have that stood them out? They had faith. Faith is that idea that you believe God. Faith is the evidence of things hoped for. The faith is the evidence of things hoped for. The faith of things not seen. And as you look at that and you see that, you see the woman, and she was trusting God over and above her circumstances. That's what people of faith do. They look at God, they trust God over and above their circumstances. And because her life could have been taken too. If the king found out that she was trying to hide her child, what was he going to do? He could have taken her life as well, couldn't he? Yes, absolutely. So they feared God, they trusted God, they had faith in God over and above their circumstances, over and above what people may say, over and above what people may do. They cared for their child, they cared for their loved one, the one that they have, over and above even their own life at that point. But they believed also in faith, they believed also that that God would care for the child and protect the child, and God would watch out for the child. And that's what a real person of faith does. They believe God over and above their circumstances, but they trust Him to take care of the circumstances, even in the midst of the difficulties or the challenges. Even though their lives, even though their circumstances could even take their own life, they're going to trust God over and above what everything else and everyone else is saying. And that's so critically important, because without that, without the faith, Moses might not have been here. I mean, God could have overrode his mother, but at that time, she chose to act on faith and fear God and trust God and have faith in God over and above her circumstances. Let's go on here. And then this is really critically important as well. And it goes on here in the story. As you look down, eventually, God, you see how God supernaturally intervenes. She trusted God in her faith, and she believed God in her faith. Now, God was going to act, because God had a plan, didn't he? God always has a plan. Well, we have to trust him that he has a plan. And women of faith and godly women and godly people need to know that God's got it all worked out. And it unfolds here that they're going to put the child in the Nile in a little wicker basket. And now, nonetheless, you know the Nile has some crocodiles in it too. So the mom was even willing to trust her baby in the Nile, even besides the king wanting to take her child's life, but could possibly take her life, but also the child could be taken or eaten by a crocodile. Crocodiles see stuff, they're pretty savvy. And they could have done that, and there are a lot of them in the Nile over in Egypt. Matter of fact, they found a prehistoric, back in that time, in a riverbed from the Nile, of a crocodile that was 42 feet long, with a jaw, with a mouth at least 6 feet long. Now think about that. Think about that. The presence of creatures like that. But the mom was trusting God. She didn't look at the circumstances. She didn't look at those things, but she had faith in God. And it's so important. And that's what godly moms do. Godly moms have faith in God over and above their circumstances, over and above people who would try and harm them. But they're trusting God with the circumstances. Now you go down to, and you look at verse 8. It says, verse 7. It says, this is his sister. No, verse 6. When she opened it, she saw the child. Behold, there was a boy crying, and she had pity on him and said, this is one of the Hebrew children. So God supernaturally had Pharaoh's daughter come down at that very moment to bathe and see this child, and God put in this woman's heart to have pity on this child. How else would have it worked? How else would have it worked? Had it not been for Pharaoh's daughter, because the Pharaoh's not going to kill the child from his own daughter, will he? Absolutely not. God knew all that. That's how God worked things out. And then it says, Pharaoh's daughter said to her, go ahead. So the girl went and called the child's mother. So shall I go and call a nurse for you from the Hebrew woman, that she may nurse for you? And look at this, God's intervention right here. And the Pharaoh's daughter said to her, go ahead. And who did Miriam get? Miriam was Moses' sister, big sister. Thank God for big sisters, right? Big sister. And big sister gets who? Of course, she gets her who? His mom. That's a powerful thing, because you see how God intervened. God intervened in a supernatural way. And we have to trust him to do that. But go on here, and this is really important. Then Pharaoh's daughter said to her, take this child away and nurse him for me, and I will give you your wages. So the woman took the child and nursed him. And the child grew, and she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. And she named him Moses, because she was drew out of the water. The legacy of a mother. So who really raised that child? His own mother. Think about that. She nursed him, but who raised him? Even though she was Pharaoh's daughter, she was given to Pharaoh, who raised Moses? His own mom did. And then you look at the life of Moses, and you look at him and how he is so powerfully used of God. Where would we be today without Moses? Who led the people to the cusp of the promised land. But that was the influence of a godly mom instilling in him all those godly values and faith in God. Think about that, guys. Think about the influence that his mom had on him and the impact that his life had on the rest of the world and for as a Hebrew, as an Israelite nation, and for us here today. Because of a godly mom who did what she poured out her life, and she put her faith into who? Into her son. And what ended up happening? He became the leader of Israel, and he became one of the key figures in the Hebrew and the Jewish nation, Moses. Because a godly woman who had faith in God to spare his life, to trust God, but also a godly woman who loved God and put her legacy of her life into her son and raising him. Now think about us, even in our own lives, as moms and even as people in general. Think about the people that have been in your life, that God has given you the privilege to either raise or to have contact with or to have or to be a part of your life. Maybe people who we've taught, maybe people who have come into our path, maybe people who have had some way, somehow have been in a part of our lives, and we've had the chance to be able to do what? To be able to influence them. I remember, and this was so critically important for me, I remember when I first came back to the Lord, of a couple of faith, who loved God, but also took me under their wing, a long-haired, ragged, holy Jean, barefoot, rebellious, drug-taking, backslidden young man, and poured their faith into me and left a lasting legacy in my life. Because they lived Christ out before me. They invited me to their home. And they used to take me to their home, pick me up on Sunday morning, make sure I got out to church, and they used to make sure that I got breakfast. They took me to their home, and they fed me. And they hung out with me. And they were patient with me when I was still smoking marijuana and going to Bible study. You know, some of us may go, oh, how could they do that? Well, reality is, I wouldn't be here today if it were not. You've got to look past those things. It's true. But the lasting legacy that they had in my life, it's invaluable. The faith that they gave in my life is invaluable. Think about the people in your life, your moms in your life. The faith that they left in you. I think of Jerry and his mom and the legacy he left in his life. And the faith that she poured out into him and his siblings. And the grandchildren as well. And think about the us and the moms and the legacy that we have in our own children or our grandchildren. And the faith that we can pour into their lives. And the legacy that we can leave in their lives. Think about it. It's powerful because you never know. You never know. You never know. Look at Billy Graham and his mom, Ruth Graham Bell. Ruth Bell Graham, I guess, yeah. And lasting legacy that she left in her son who, and her other children, her one son and her, I don't know how many girls that they had, but 4 girls. But the reality is that they had, she left a lasting legacy. Because she was the one who predominantly raised the children because Billy was out on the road all the time. So look at the legacy that she left behind. Powerful, isn't it? Really powerful. And think about us and our lives that we have in the lives of people, the moms, us who are moms, or even going beyond just moms, but even us as people have an impact in other people's lives, and the faith that we have. We don't realize, folks, we don't realize the influence that we can have in people's lives. We don't. We don't, folks. Look at the people in your lives and use those opportunities to pour into them. Because when we're gone, they're going to be going on before us. After us, I meant. Let's look at 2 Timothy chapter 1 verse 5. 2 Timothy 1 verse 5. This is so powerful. It's only one verse, but there's so much in this verse. For I am mindful of the sincere faith within you, which was first dwelt in your grandmother Lois and your mother Eunice, and I am sure that it is in you as well. Who's Paul talking to here? Talking about Timothy. Timothy, a young pastor, disciple of Paul. Powerful man of God. Paul recognized the influence in Timothy's life. We're not sure whose Timothy's dad was. It doesn't mention it here, but it does mention his grandmother, Lois, and his mother, who? Eunice. And so, what does it say about them? Again, it comes back to that one word. For I am mindful of the sincere faith within you. So what was in Timothy? A sincere faith. It wasn't a hypocritical faith. It wasn't a faith that was all words and no punch to it. But it was a sincere, genuine faith, a faith that was real. They knew God. It was a faith that knew God, that loved God, that followed God, that walked after God. Now, if you look at that, that's something that's pretty impressive because, if you look at people's lives, you can see a phony a mile away sometimes. Somebody who's hypocritical. And Jesus called out the religious leaders on that. They were calling whitewashed walls. And everyone came into him as they come into the pearly gates. St. Peter was opening up the pearly gates for him, so to speak. I mean, that's of course not biblical, but that's, you understand what I'm saying. And they were welcoming him in, and one by one they started patting him on the back. Thank you. 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 Because all of the impact, all the lives that person had touched, all the lives that that person, as they were entering the pearly gates, touched, and they were in heaven because that person had an impact on their lives. You don't realize the impact that you can have. We have faith, need to put our faith and share our faith with those around us. And we need to influence and have influence in their lives. We need to, folks. We need to. Because if we don't, woe is us.